So in this lesson, we're going to talk about goal setting. And goal setting is a technique that helps people to achieve their goals. It's used by all sorts of people, including successful business people and students and athletes, and it provides them with short-term motivation and a long-term vision. The use of structured goal setting methods can greatly increase your chances of attaining your goals. So by setting goals on a routine basis, you're going to decide what you want to achieve, and then we're going to move towards the achievement of those goals step by step. And by knowing precisely what you want to achieve, you know what you have to do to concentrate on it. So you can also measure and take pride in the achievement of these goals. And you can see forward progress in what might previously maybe have seemed like a long, pointless grind. And you're also going to raise your self-confidence as you're recognizing your ability and your competence in achieving these goals that you have set, and also in achieving more difficult goals in the future. So by the end of this unit, you're going to be able to understand the rationale behind goal setting, understand the main characteristics of goal setting, understanding the use of a structured goal setting method, be able to demonstrate your knowledge and skills through role play, and understand the relationship between problem solving and goal setting, and be able to apply that goal setting skill when counseling your clients. So I have placed an open-ended question in the lesson below this video. I'd like for you to answer this question here. Why do we set short-term goals when we're counseling, and what are the main characteristics of short-term goals? I'd like you to pause the video and go ahead and answer that question, and then I'm going to post this video below the video that you see pictured here on this slide. I will post this video below in the lesson for you to take a look at. So let's look at some of the benefits of setting short-term goals. Identifying some of the things that can be done in the short term are greatly going to improve the likelihood that your client is going to be able to see a way to move forward. So people are going to often avoid taking action because they worry that the risk is too big. And so they're going to lock themselves into inactivity because everything seems so big and so difficult. They literally feel like they can't succeed at anything. And so your client is going to become more confident that they can move forward after achieving just even a modest success. And at this point, then you can introduce more complicated activities and requirements. But we want to remember that short-term goals need to be SMART. That's an acronym. And we'll go over that in a moment. But this means that you're measuring your client's performance and you're providing feedback on their achievements. And this is going to reinforce improvement, and it's going to help your client maintain their commitment to their goals. So the client's short-term goals need to be in line with their stage of change, obviously. So for example, like when people are in the contemplation phase, they're still ambivalent about changing their behavior. So it's going to be important that the client sees more modest and realistic goals in this particular stage of change. The client's short-term goal could be to move them into the action phase. And then the counselor is going to need to follow the principles of motivational interviewing, and the client's going to need to agree that the consideration of behavior change is an important short-term goal here. And it's going to be important that clients are at the center of the decision making when you're developing these short-term goals. What they feel is important for them to achieve should be central to the decision making. So having said that, the counselor has a very important role in decision making. Sometimes the goals can be unrealistic, and they can also be potentially risky in terms of relapse potential. So the clients need clinical wisdom to assist them to understand what is actually realistic. And it's going to be important for you to assist the client in gaining greater insight into their potential vulnerabilities. And you can see on the handout in this lesson underneath this video, it discusses the goal setting and problem solving. Now let's look at the SMART goals. This is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So a good short-term goal needs to be SMART. And when we're talking about specific, a specific goal has a much greater chance of being accomplished than a general goal. So to set a specific goal, you need to answer the 6W questions. Who, what, where, when, which, and why. Who's involved? What do I want to accomplish? We need to identify a location. When, we need to establish a time frame. Which, we need to identify requirements and constraints. And why? We need to look at specific reasons or purposes or benefits of accomplishing the goal. So an example would be of a general goal would be, I want to get in shape. But a specific goal would be, I want to get in shape by joining a health club and working out 3 days a week. That is more specific. It's measurable. We want to establish concrete criteria to measure progress towards the attainment of every goal that you're setting. So when you measure your progress, you're going to stay on track. You're going to be able to reach your target dates and experience, that exhilaration of achieving the goals, and it's going to encourage you to reach that main goal. So to kind of determine if your goal is measurable, you need to ask those questions of how much, how many, how will I know when it's accomplished? And then we need to look at, is it attainable? When you identify the goals that are most important to you, you begin to figure out ways that you can achieve those goals. So you can then develop the attitudes, the abilities, the skills, and the capacity to reach them. And you begin seeing previously overlooked opportunities to bring yourself closer to the achievement of your goals. And you can attain most goals when you plan your steps wisely and establish a time frame that allows you to carry out those steps. The goals that may have seemed far away and out of reach eventually are going to move closer and become more attainable. Not because your goals shrink, but because you grow and expand to match them. And when you list your goals, you're going to build your self-image. You're going to see yourself as worthy of these goals, and you're going to develop the traits and the personality that allow you to possess them. And it's also important to ensure that these goals are not only attainable, but also agreeable to both parties. And oftentimes the clients and the counselors, they may not agree on the appropriateness of the goals. So there needs to be a process of negotiation to ensure that both parties are in agreement. Then we have to make sure they're realistic. And to be realistic, the goal must represent an objective that you're both willing and able to work toward. So a goal can be both ambitious and realistic. You're the only one who can really decide just how ambitious your goal should be. But you need to be sure that every goal represents substantial progress. An ambitious goal is sometimes easier to attain than one that does not seem ambitious, because ambitious goals require more motivation, and those that don't require much motivation may not be of much interest. So your goal is probably realistic if you truly believe that it can be accomplished. And another way to know whether your goal is realistic is to ask yourself whether you've accomplished anything similar in the past, or to ask yourself what conditions would have to exist to accomplish that goal. And then lastly, we need to make sure it's time bound. A goal should be grounded within a time frame. And without a time frame, there's no sense of urgency. So for example, if you want to lose 4 pounds, but you haven't set a date by which you're going to achieve the loss, you're going to lack the motivation to even get started in the first place. But if you anchor it with a date, like I'm gonna lose 4 pounds by May 1st, then you're gonna have a clear sense of how much time you have to achieve it, and you know when you need to start. So I always say make them into actionable items that you can put on a calendar. Your goals should be actionable items. When we break them down, it should be actionable items that we can place on a calendar so we know when we need to meet that particular broken down goal. So we can list our goals and select one or two to work towards. You want to ask your clients to think of all the goals that they have for the next year. What is it that you want to accomplish? And where would you like to be 1 year from now? And if clients initially have difficulties coming up with the goals, you want to ask them to think about whether there's anything about their lives that they would like to change or anything with which they're not happy. And you want to write down these goals as your clients are coming up with them. And try to word the goals so that they are more positive, like I will pass this course, rather than I will not fail this course. And then after thinking about their goals for a while, the clients are going to find that they have many different goals that they want to achieve. And that's great. But working on all of those goals at once is going to leave them with limited time and effort to focus on each one, and it's likely to make them feel overwhelmed. So take a closer look at the list and prioritize the goals and try to focus on just one or two early on in the goal reaching phase. And when we're thinking about goals and selecting the ones to work on, it's going to be important to be realistic. So in order for the goal setting to work, the goals have to be achievable. And some goals are clearly not realistic. So, like for example, a lot of people would love to find a job where they earn $100,000 a year, but this clearly isn't a realistic goal for most people. And it may be difficult to determine, whether some goals are realistic for your client. But you can help your client to decide whether their goals are attainable by just talking openly about them. And setting goals at the right level involves making sure that they're not too difficult or they're not too easy to achieve. And it's going to be ideal to set goals that are slightly out of the client's immediate grasp, but not so far that there's little hope of achieving them. And it often takes practice to set goals appropriately. And often the goals may have to be revised if they begin to appear too easy or too difficult for the client. So don't be disheartened if your client has to revise their goals. This is all part of the goal setting process, and we need to expect it. And we also need to define our goals clearly and break them down into smaller steps. So once that client has selected one or two realistic and achievable goals, then they're going to need to define what those are very clearly. So you want to ask your client to be precise when defining their goals. Include dates and times and amounts so that the client can measure their achievement. And then we want to divide each goal into small, precise steps. So these steps should be ones that the client can attain in a really short period of time, like over days or weeks. And if possible, we need to try to make these steps more enjoyable. There are often many different ways to attain the same goal, so choose the most enjoyable way when you can. Then we want to review progress and revise goals as necessary. We want to review the client's progress towards achieving their goal quite regularly. And we want to identify and write down any problems or obstacles that the client is encountering. We want to engage in that problem solving to determine whether there are some methods of fixing these problems so that your client can continue working toward the goals as planned. And in some cases, the problem may not have an apparent solution, and you're going to have to revise either the steps toward the goal or the goal itself. So don't be disappointed if your client has to revise their goals. We need to expect that, and it's going to indicate that you're using the goal setting method correctly. When you review your client's progress, we want to note whether they're achieving the goal too easily, or if progress is slow or difficult or non-existent for that client. There's no failures in goal setting, just adjustments to the process or to the level of the goal. We also need to remember that goals may change with the passage of time. So even though something may have been a goal 6 months ago, it might not be a goal today. If goals don't hold any attraction any longer, simply just change them or let them go. Goal setting is a tool to help clients achieve the goals that they actually want to achieve. And then lastly, we need to take satisfaction in our clients' efforts and achievements. The clients should celebrate their own successes when they achieve their goals. We can congratulate our clients because they've worked hard and they deserve to feel good about their success. And their success would not have been possible without effort and without achieving the individual steps towards that goal. So whenever clients achieve a step or they make a significant effort toward achieving a goal, take the time to let them enjoy the satisfaction of having progressed forward. So now we need to gauge commitment towards this. So you can find out how important your client thinks it is to commit to their short-term goals by using this readiness ruler. This is just simply a scale with gradations from 1 to 10, where 1 is I am not willing to change, I'm not ready, and 10 is I'm extremely willing to change. And you can ask your client to rate how important it is for them to change. So I might say this to a client. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 means you're not willing to change and 10 means that you are extremely willing to change, how would you rate yourself right now? And this readiness ruler can be used during counseling as a way of kind of encouraging your clients to talk about their reasons for change. The same sort of scale can be used to assess how confident clients are when they can undertake a task. So the confidence ruler can be used with clients who have indicated that, it's important for them to make a change, or maybe we can pose it as a hypothetical question to kind of encourage clients to talk about how they would go about making a change. I have a readiness ruler in one of the group topics that I do that I ask the question, what would need to happen in order to make you more willing to change? Not to actually make a change, but to become more willing. So you might say something along the lines of, how confident are you that you can undertake the task if you decide to do it? On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1's I'm not at all confident and 10 is I'm extremely confident, where would you rate yourself? You don't actually need to show the client a ruler, but it may be helpful, especially with clients with low literacy or number skills. So for some clients, it may be enough to just describe the scale. And if the client answers a 7 or below, we might want to look at that and ask what's preventing them from taking that next step. And we can also ask what would need to change for your rate, or to rate your chances higher. Obviously, because this is an online presentation, we can't do a small group exercise. But if you want to work with your clinical supervisor or another counselor or another student or with someone you trust to do this exercise, you can do that. I've also provided an open-ended question in this lesson below the video for you to apply the goal setting technique to this particular problem. When I meet friends, I end up using heroin. How might that particular goal setting be applied to that problem? I'd like for you to answer that question in the open-ended question box below this video. So, in summary, our short-term goals are important for moving forward. We need to define those goals clearly and break them down into smaller steps. We want to determine the commitment through the use of the readiness ruler and review any progress in order to revise goals as necessary and support our clients for undertaking those difficult tasks. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section below or the chat box below this video in the lesson.